closed. We fell back in the development of aviation. Unfortunately, we were very quickly in the start, but it stopped. After the First World War, it started all over again, but then our politicians that were so intelligent said that, well, because what we have learned from the First World War, it will never be a war anymore. So we reduce 50% of the army, 50% of the navy, but we follow the British example and we make an air force. So from 1926, the 1st of July, we have an air force in Sweden. To put money into the armed forces. So because of that, there was very little money to build up an air force. And when the Second World War started, it was too late. And then we had to go out into the world and find where can we buy aircrafts. We managed to buy 3 types from Italy. Luckily, we had written a contract with Sikorsky in the United States, 120 aircraft, but we only had 60. And then the import got stopped because the American needed the aircrafts by themselves. And luckily, Saab has then been established in 1939. So they had started to produce aircrafts. And now we're going to look at the very first.
Which one is the first aircraft of the Swedish air company, right?
Oh, we have passed it.
Oh, okay.
But we can have a look at it.
Oh, yes.
Come back. This is Saab's very first aircraft. Produced by themselves. It's called the Aircraft 17. There are 2 types, a bomber, a single engine, and a reconnaissance, also a single engine. All metal. They could be powered by 3 types of engines because it was now the Second World War. It was difficult to buy engines, but we had got Pratt & Whitney's, and we had the Bristol Mercury and Italian Piaggio. This one has a Bristol Mercury. It is a dive bomber. Dive bomber was very popular in the beginning of the late 30s, beginning of the 40s. The undercarriage is very special. You could choose between to have wheels, but you can also have skis landing on snow and ice, and you can have floats. The big metal pieces on the legs to the undercarriage are air or dive brakes. So because you were going to do a dive bombing, the speed accelerated enormously and it was difficult then to climb back up again without breaking down the aircraft and the pilot would be unconscious. But those brakes made that you were almost hanging in the air. Machine gun. This very example is a reconnaissance aircraft. There is 1 machine still flying. We have a Swedish Airforce historic flight. They have 6 or 7 aircrafts of different type, and they have 1 of the B-17s still flying. Team. A twin engine bomber, also full metal, a crew of 3. You could choose between 2 engines, Pratt & Whitney, or Daimler-Benz 605, that is a liquid-cooled 12-cylinder piston engine. The reason why this very aeroplane is here is that in 1949, there was a squadron of 8 aircraft going on an exercise up in the very northern parts of Sweden. Their commander, he had his own aircraft, and they also had a B-3, Junker 86, that flew all the equipment. They started the flight. It was February, minus 25 degrees, beautiful weather. Halfway up through Sweden, they stopped for a refuel stop and a lunch. And then they continue. The crews were rather unexperienced, guys of 20, 25 years old. Before they reach their goal, that was Luleå Air Base, and the wing there, they met a rather severe blizzard. And they couldn't continue. So they turned back all the 9 aircrafts. And the aim was an airport in a town called Sundsvall, where we were going to land. But rather quickly they realized that we will not have enough fuel. So after half an hour, they talked to each other and they said, well, land wherever you can. One aircraft left, that they flew now over the Botnia Sea. One aircraft left and flew more westerly, tried, probably, this has never been proven, but probably tried to reach the 4th Air Force Wing. They never came there. The aircrafts have never been found. The other 9, another 8, landed on the ice on the Botnic Sea, on the Botnic. This one landed close to the harbor in Härnösand. Luckily, they didn't fell down the landing gear, so they landed on the belly and glide on the ice, and they could luckily go out. 2 days later, the ice cracked, and the aircraft sank to the bottom. Some decades later, Saab and others, we don't have a B-18. We have all the other aircraft we can show, but not a B-18. Then somebody said, hey, wait, there is one on the bottom of the harbor in Härnösand. Let's go there. So 1979, she was picked up. And then the restoration has been made by a very qualified group here at the museum. For years they worked on it, and now it's, well, mint condition, almost.
You'd never believe that had been
No,
underwater for 40 years.
no, no. Saab aircrafts.
There's so many aircraft in here where they're the only ones in the world. It's such a great collection of stuff. And here's one of them.
We start with the one to the left, with the pushing propeller. That was something very new. 1944, it flew for the first time in the Air Force. Though it had a pushing propeller, it must have a nose wheel. It can't have a tail wheel, because then the propeller will hit the ground. And that was a good invention, because now the pilot has a very good view. No big engine, no propeller, and he can also have, as it is now, 5 machine guns in the nose. But if you're going to leave the aircraft now with a parachute, you will probably go straight into the propeller. It's not so good, and also to the tail booms. So then it was the eject seat. So Saab was very early with an eject seat. Germany was also very. The first documented jump was a lieutenant in Germany called Helmut Schenk, 1943 on the East Front. He left his aircraft with an eject seat. And then, of course, Martin Baker also did it. Saab used it for the first time with the dummy in 1944. So they were very, very early, one of the first in the world. This was a good aircraft, but the Germans had shown that during the last year of the Second World War, they were not flying with propeller. They flew with jet engines. Also the British did it with the Gloucester Meteor. They never left England, but they flew at home. So we got a new commander of the Air Force, and he said we must renew the Air Force, become a modern Air Force, and we will only fly jet. And that signal was sent to Saab. Saab then used this aircraft. We had got engines from de Havilland, and they thought that you could remake the G-21 around 20%, and then you will have a jet fighter. It was not so easy. They had to rebuild 50% of the aircraft. So in this one, there should then be a jet engine and a fighter. Now it turned out that it was not a good fighter because it was too heavy. It was not agile enough. We had bought also de Havilland's Vampire. That was a very agile aircraft. So after 6 years, there was no more operations with this one. Otherwise, they are rather, they look alike, 5 machine guns in the nose, but this one has a pod underneath with 8 machine guns. Well, you could say, typically a Swedish invention to show something new.
Shark painting is a machine gun.
8 machine guns in that pod.
Oh.
To be honest, this is not a real G21R. It is, but it looks like one.
Air Force.
That's the Air Force, the 3 crowns. It has always been like that, but this is the latest version from the 40s, yellow and blue. It was black in the. You can see on that aircraft is
Black and white.
black and white. So that aircraft is a Tunnan G, also produced
What's the
in Sweden.
meaning? What's the meaning of the color? The different and
Blue and yellow are the Swedish colors, the national color.
yes.
So that's the reason why it is.
and black and white for
That was in the very beginning when we didn't know exactly what was going to go on. It looks like a barrel.
barrel. Yes.
Saab had an engineer called Frid Wenström. 1945, he went to Switzerland, and there he met some schoolmates that he had been to technical school before the Second World War. There he met people who had construction drawings of modern aircraft, though the Germans was well ahead of us for modern aircraft. He got these construction papers, and that was what we can see here. The aircraft was built in Linköping by Saab in a total number of 660 something. It has 2 world records in speed. How come? Well, first of all, it has a fantastic fuselage, soft like a shark, a new type of aluminum. It has for that time a very modern jet engine from de Havilland, the de Havilland Ghost. And the Germans had also noticed that if you, instead of have straight wings, you have wings that are arrow-shaped and swept backwards, you can fly much faster. So Saab started to try out this on other airplanes, and finally they found out that 25 degrees would be a perfect angle to fly fast, and it was. This is a reconnaissance aircraft too, but the most known is the fighter with the 4 20mm guns, and also equipped with the missiles. They had already the Sidewinder, the first Sidewinder.
Sidewinder.
So one day, one guy, he climbed here at Malmö. He climbed up to 14,500 meters. He did a half roll, he dived down, and he thought that he had failed, but he had said to his friend, I will do another test, but I will end the day with trying to do this. Go out and listen if you can hear that I passed the sound. There it is. And he came down and it was nothing had happened, and he thought, well, I thought I flew through the barrier.
This brilliantly Swedish thing. The history of the Cold War told in soft furnishings.
You know, we were very lucky during the Second World War. We didn't take part of it. We were neutral, so to say.
Neutral.
Yeah. But when we were lucky, because then when the war was over, our towns, they stood there. We had our factories, we had the harbors, the airfields, everything worked in the way it was. And we had material that the rest of the world needed, or Europe needed, to rebuild Europe. And Europe had got money from the American, from the Marshall Plan, so they could pay for it. They wanted to have the timber, the iron, the copper, the mechanics, the cars that we could produce. And the Swedish factories, they ran faster and faster and faster, and we earned more and more money, and we had a very good time. But there was a lack of people. We were not enough people. So many Italians came to Linköping to work on the Saab factories. Germans came to Sweden. People from Greece, people from Yugoslavia came to Sweden. And when the factories grew and we had to, and was going to produce more and more, they needed persons. And the persons at that time, most of them were farmers. They lived on the countryside, but the factories was in the towns. So now you had to build up modern flats. And though we had a good economy, it's going to be a high standard. It's going to be electric stove. It's going to be evacuation fans. It's going to be a good kitchen. And at this time, the women worked at home to take care of the man and the children and the home, so they should have a good life. And it should be easy for her to have cupboards and sewing machines and make the life easy for even a refrigerator if you were lucky. The artists who have made these flats, in this one in the 50s, he painted a lot of red things. That because we had a fear of Russians. Because Russia had now taken 50% of Europe. And Joseph Stalin, he had declared in January 45 when he met Franklin D. Roosevelt and Winston Churchill that he would never give back what he had taken when they had signed the peace documents. So therefore it's of the red things, and you can see Joseph Stalin's in small miniatures hanging around.
What's his name?
Bengt Nordenskiöld. He succeeded with that. So now we have started to build up from a very low level a modern air force. And in the beginning of the 60s, we were the fourth biggest air force in the world. We had about 1,000 aircraft based on 17 bases around Sweden. United States, Russia, Britain, and Sweden.
Okay.
That were the four biggest. What is then the purpose for the Air Force? Well, I said that the Russians were very aggressive, and they had taken the Baltic states and they stood on the harbor of the Baltic Sea. And the next step, if they take, we are the goal. So we have to meet the Russian bombers very quickly as soon as they leave the Russian border, and that you can do only with a very efficient jet aircraft and interceptor. And the Tunnan, the aircraft 29, was not so efficient, and Saab was working on an aircraft. But in the meantime, we bought from England Hawker Hunter, 120 aircrafts. If you're going to conquer a country, you can't just bomb it. You must also send in troops. You must stand on the land there. And then for the Russians, the way to do that, then you have to go by ship. Saab had made a fantastic attack aircraft. This is the aircraft after the B-18, you know, the twin engine. That's this one, the attack aircraft 32. Under the wings you see two missiles, sea missiles called 04. You launch them on a distance of about 35 kilometers from the target. They dive down to 10 meters above sea level in a speed of 800 kilometers. They have a charge of 300 kilos in it, and they fly over the ship. And when they are just over the ship, it explodes and probably you just cut the ship in two pieces. Or if you hit the side of the ship, the detonation will not be at that very moment. It will be some milliseconds later when it's inside the ship to make sure that everything goes to the bottom. So then there will not be any Russians here. So the speed of sound. Four missiles, the Sidewinder, the green one in the front, and Falcon on both sides. This one is infrared and the other one is radar missiles. And you have then the fuel tanks underneath. Sweden has a philosophy that if there is a crisis or a war, of course the enemy wants to attack the wing, the wing plane, the base of the airplane. So leave it as soon as possible. So then it's prepared war bases in the middle of the nowhere in the forest. And the runway then will be highways or roads. Then you need an aircraft that could take off and land on a rather short distance. Takeoff was hardly any problem for the aircraft 35, but to land on a short distance, then we talk about 800 meters. So it has a braking parachute to make sure that it will stop in a short time. Another thing is that we had conscripts. We have not professional technicians around an aircraft. So when an aircraft like this lands, within 10 minutes, 8 conscripts, an officer, will refuel, rearm, and fill up the oxygen tanks, and the aircraft will be in the air again. Which of course is very efficient, that an aircraft should be in the air, not on the ground. So there Saab has succeeded with produced aircraft like that.
So before the Saab company has set up 21.
Where we started, the 17,
17,
the
18,
the 21,
21, 29.
32, 35.
Oh, okay.
And these two, they are propelled by Rolls-Royce Avon engines. And the other had de Havilland and Daimler-Benz. Saab has never produced any engines, but Sweden had produced engines on license. The Rolls-Royce engine and the de Havilland engine. And for the next aircraft 37, Viggen, is Pratt & Whitney. It was at one time, I don't know if it is that still, but it was one of the biggest engines in the world.
It's a JT8, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a DC9 engine with an afterburner.
No, we have one example of the engine in the old museum. The engine was on show. I think it's more than 6 meters long and almost 1.5 meter in diameter.
Might be 9 to Gripen, it's not the last. I was a squadron commander for Saab until 2006. In front of the big Delta wing. And the canard wings, together with the boogie landing gear, it's a double boogie.
You mean this one?
Yes, that's correct. That whole thing is called the canard wing. And then combined with the quite powerful, not powerful, but what is it? Powerful landing gear. It was almost like a aircraft carrier aircraft because it could really stop without the braking chute. So it stopped on like 800 meters on the on ordinary road. And also it has a unique part of the engine, the civilian one, where you can reverse. So you have, we call them eyelids. At the back of the aircraft is 3 big plates which close the exhaust, and when you give throttle, the power goes forward, so it brakes the aircraft as well. So you could actually reverse that aircraft.
Oh,
Yeah, that was quite cool, especially when we are on a road base. We could easily.
but it's not a vertical.
No,
No.
But you could reverse it, and then so that was very very unique as well for that kind of aircraft, and it was made in different versions as well. So this is the air-to-ground version. There was one air-to-air fighter version, and that version had a more powerful engine and some better hydraulics, so they can pull more G's or keep the G's longer, the G-force when turning. And then we had a reconnaissance version with a different radar. And then we had a photo reconnaissance version with no radar, but only cameras, different kind of cameras. And then there was a two-seated version as well. So for training, it was only used for training. So when I converted to fly the Gripen, the Viggen, you started in the back seat as a student pilot and then moved forward to the front seat and the instructor pilot in the back seat, like today in Gripen. So and these were
Probably more
JAS.
of that than I do.
we will have a test now because we had a briefing on this Gripen E this afternoon. Yeah.
Yes.
What I can say about this very example that stands here is that it is, I think it was delivered to the Air Force 2001 and was taken away 9 years later and placed here at the museum. And it is a school version. And probably a lot has happened from that day now to what we can see today.
Indeed.
It's,
You must have flown this.
Yeah.
812.
8-1.
to England and then took part in all the landings from D-Day and on until the Operation Versity 45 in something like that. Then Swedish companies bought aircraft, civil transport.
MiG-15.
Yes, it has stuff going on. I was in the RAF museum 2 weeks
Katerina.
ago with my kids for the first time in a long time.
Draken.